Welcome back. The next topic on our agenda is trust. You're going to hear from three speakers, three short presentations, and then we'll all come back on stage and have a conversation and answer your questions. And I'm here to kick it off. My name's Tonya Reese. I work at Edelman, which is a large communications firm, a global firm. And each year we field a global piece of research called the Edelman Trust Barometer. And what we measure is primarily trust in institutions. We look at four main institutions: government, right? How much do you trust government to do what is right on a scale of 1 to 9? We look at trust in business, NGOs, and the media. And when you average the trust levels of those four institutions, you get what we call our trust index. And here is this year's lineup of 26 countries that we measure. And you can see the US right there, about halfway down in the green bubble of distrust, along with most of the other nations that we measure. Right? So we've been in a distrusting environment in most of the countries. There's just a small handful, primarily developing countries at the top with fast-growing economies, where people are feeling good about the future, right, of their country and of their own personal prospects. What we have found over the years is that trust is a forward-looking metric. I trust you to behave a certain way in the future. So when people are feeling good about the future, trust goes up. We see some correlations to growth and changes in GDPR, right, in terms of how trusting different nations are. So here we are in distrustor territory. If you look at it at an institution level here in the US, what I really should be showing you is a 3-year trend, because our 2016 data showed a very sharp, in fact, the sharpest decline in trust in the US that we've ever measured. So what we saw last year is a little bit of a bounce back, but not a return to pre-2016 levels of trust. And the two institutions that continue to be distrusted by the general population are government and the media. I don't think I've told anyone here yet anything that they would find shocking. The informed public part of the chart at the top, those are people who are in the top 25% of income, college educated, and over-index on consumption of business and public policy information, right? So people who keep up with the news, who we can assume play an active role in some kind of public or business life. And you can see they're feeling quite a bit better than the average person, right? Stock market was booming, economies are up. But one of the things we've paid a lot of attention to over years is the inequality of trust, right? And how that has changed and in fact grown over time. And when you see large levels of inequality and trust, you start to see other things happening in the research that are not necessarily positive. Trying to move on to the next slide. Here we go. So government is not trusted here. It's not trusted in many places. And what we find these days is that when government trust has vanished and eroded to this extent, more and higher expectations are placed on business, right? Business is often seen as having the ability to solve problems that government can't, to innovate in ways that government can't, to collaborate internationally and even within a country or across institutions in order to solve problems, right? And so the more we've seen the trust level in government to get things done go down, the more the expectation has gone up that business have more of an active role. So what is going on here? You know, globally, an 8-point difference, gap between trust in business and government. Here in the US, it's a 14-point gap, right? And then you can see there in places where government is really completely broken, that gap is even greater. So this is happening in an environment where not only half of the mass population believes that the current system is not working for them, right? We asked a series of questions. Do you think things are fair? Do you want them to change? Are you confident that current leadership in your country has the ability to solve problems? Do you have hope for a better future? Not only does half of the mass population believe the system is not working, but those who are better off and have more privileges agree, nearly half, 46%, that the system is not working, and agree that there is injustice and that things are not working as well as they maybe should be and could be. All right, so what are some of the things that people are feeling uneasy about, right? There's far too much data here than I have the time to share with you today, things like job loss, but among them, fake news and misinformation, right? And you can see we asked this question in a way that's quite spicy. People worry about false information being used as a weapon, right? 70% of the global population, I think it's about 78% in the US. And what we're showing in the bar chart on the left, the column chart, are trust in different types of news sources. And we have 65% of the population telling us they get most of their news today on social media in a place that the majority of Americans do not trust, right? So we're getting news on platforms that we don't trust, from algorithms that we don't necessarily trust, you know, to have our best interests at heart. And so there's a big disconnect there in terms of our ability to trust information, have a conversation that's based on facts, right? Again, not necessarily telling you anything that you don't know. And so in this world, we're looking for answers, we're looking for good information, and one of the few people and sources that we trust and that has credibility is business leadership, right? 81% in the US say that CEOs should be taking the lead on change rather than waiting for government to impose it, right? 81%, and the big blue arrow in the slide is big and blue because you don't often see a double-digit increase in a data point from one year to another. Right? Over the last year, the percent of people, it was the majority last year, right? It was about, 7 in 10, but that's gone up in 1 year to 8 in 10 who say, CEOs, please step up, right? We need someone who knows how to get things done to make things happen and change things for us, right? And you can see the list of issues is long and growing and changing every day. We don't expect companies to do this as a charity, right? You're not an NGO. If you're a CEO, you're running a company, and we think you can both do well for society while also doing well for your company, right? You don't have to give up making a bottom line profit in order for people to believe you're doing the right thing. We think you can do both. And this expectation for how business operates and interfaces with other institutions, this growing expectation, it extends to the consumer-facing side of the house as well, right? We did, for the first time this year, a study where we specifically looked at the topic of brand trust and asked people to rank different and to rate different types of buying criteria about brands. And what you can see there, I must be able to trust the brand to do what is right, 83%, nearly as high as the traditional brand criteria that we all studied in marketing class: quality, value, convenience, ingredients. Trust is right up there with all of those, and ahead of some of the more traditional CSR type metrics, right, such as reputation or supply chain management. So very important to consumers. And when we ask them, however, do you feel that you can trust most of the brands that you buy, only 34% agree with that statement, right? So we have quite a bit of work to do, and it's an opportunity, right, is part of what I'm here to say. This is not just, oh my gosh, nobody else is solving the world's problems, therefore we have to. It's an opportunity for business to really have a voice, and it's an opportunity for us to strengthen our relationships with all of our stakeholders, right, including consumers. So look at these benefits that consumers are willing to give you if they trust you, right? They will stay more loyal. They will buy new products when you introduce them, right, or new brands when you bring them to market. they will advocate for you in the market, right? And I have a couple of slides at the end that talk about just how difficult it is to build your reputation and to tell your story with advertising these days in the type of media environment we have. So having consumers or customers or stakeholders who will advocate on your behalf is absolutely critical. There's so many reasons that the importance of trust has increased for brands, right? Even at the product experience level, right? I'm trusting you with my personal data more than I ever have, right? I am sending money to you over the internet and expecting that you're gonna send me something that will work, and if it doesn't work, that I can send it back and you'll fix it for me without me ever having to meet you across a sales counter, right? And I'm also trusting brands to do the right thing by society, right? To figure out solutions to the plastic problems that we've created, or to make investments in a way that are going to lead to sustainable growth as opposed to short-term, with longer-term problems down the line. And you can see here some of the reasons people are not sure that they can fully trust brands have less to do with the quality of the product or the service you're providing and more to do with questions about some of those other responsibilities and how you're going to address them. Right? So what are we doing to really convince people we're going to put customers first and we're going to be good citizens on the planet? And again, trust alone, right, is that first bar, 47%. If I trust you to do a great product experience for me, then about 1 in 2 say, yeah, I'm going to give you rewards such as buying you first and being loyal and advocating and defending. But if you can earn full trust across not just product but also the customer experience and trust that you will do the right thing for society, those rewards go up by double digits. Okay, a couple of quick things to close on. The other big thing we've seen increase year to year to year over the last few years is this number. We now have 74% saying that they do something, right? Whether it's cord cutting or managing their content consumption, paying for premium content, using an ad blocker, whatever it is, right, that they're doing to avoid advertising. It's not a great experience for consumers for the most part, right? And there's many strategies and many ways to address this, but it basically means that conversational media, the ability to activate peer voices, to use trusted influencers. We have one data point here about how much more reliable influencers are, online influencers. This is from a survey we did among young adults, right? Looking at how much they trust influencers and how much of an impact influencers have. But when we talk about online influencers, we truly do mean trusted voices, right? Peer voices. This is not the celebrity with 1 million followers necessarily. This is someone who they can relate to, that is slightly aspirational, and that has an area of expertise that is a shared interest, right? So getting creative and getting a little bit more thoughtful about how it is you engage with people in a way that activates these voices and creates conversations rather than talking at them is over time going to be far better at building and earning trust and earning people's attention as well. So I'm going to leave you with just a couple of thoughts about trust when it comes to interacting with your stakeholders today. It's an essential consideration not only for business relationships, which we know, it's an essential consideration for operating as part of a broader set of institutions, right? Interacting with government regulators and other types of stakeholders. It's also essential these days when it comes to the public and to consumer trust, right? And what people want to see from us as business leaders, they want us to step up, they want us to speak out, and they want us to convince people that we're going to do the right thing, not only for them, for our products and services, for our employees, but also for our customers and for the community at large. And so we have a lot of power to do that, a lot of ability to make things happen differently and to shift conversations around things. And I look forward to a discussion later about how we can put that to work. Thank you.
I would like to share a story about sharing cities. But before we do so, I would like to take this example of my daughter, Roelie. And Roelie is 12 years old. She lives in Amsterdam. And she lives, I think, in a great community. This is Roelie with her sister Nanou. And this is just in front of our house, where this former dollhouse is now functioning as a sort of a library for stuff that people don't use anymore. So it's a jam for them all the time to find like books there, clothing, you know, even this American shorts, if you can see it while we live in Amsterdam. Anything they see there, they take it out, or stuff that they don't use anymore, they put it in, and everybody in the neighborhood does so the same. So it's the sharing economy in its purest and most offline form. Some of her friends in the neighborhood, and some dogs that they also share. Some other people, neighbors in the neighborhood that we have good times with. And it's always nice to see that there's not really a barrier between ages or any other backgrounds. Sharing meals, of course. This is just in front of our house. We are lucky to live in front of a park. So these are summers that a lot of people get together, of course. And even this is just the water in front of our home, where a neighbor just recently built a slide, so they could just slide into the water and have fun together in front of their home. So even we are in our community sharing slides. And this, I don't know whoever went to King's Day in Amsterdam before, but this is in the Vondelpark, the big park in Amsterdam, where once a year everybody gets together to share, or at least get rid of maybe the stuff that you don't use anymore. So this is just some pictures out of the life of my daughter Roelie and her sister Nanou. And they even made it to a book recently, which is called The People Who Share, and in this case, The Kids Who Share. So somehow their lives are already becoming a bit of an inspiration to other people. But there is a but. This is also Roelie. This is, by the way, in Florence last year. We did a home swap there. And we stayed near this river called the Arno. But it's also a reflection moment, because Roelie is not only a cheerful kid, 12 years old, just going to high school, she's also worried about her future. And there she sometimes says to me, I don't know what my future will look like. And maybe that could be a worry of any person and any kid. But she sees the stories about climate change, etc. And she thinks, okay, this is maybe not a good foresight for my future. And Daddy, how about my future? What can we do to ensure a good future for me? And of course, anyone who has kids here and otherwise maybe envision for a few minutes that this is your daughter, that gets to you. Lucky thing maybe in my case is that I have two things in place that might form a little bit of an answer. And one, the fact that I set up a global network of cities, and two, that this is on an emerging phenomenon called the sharing economy. So let me really briefly and foremostly quickly take you to some examples of our work, and hopefully it inspires you to somehow join and help this new generation have a good future. So please, my question is to team up with us. A few years ago, we did research in Amsterdam, and looking into the sharing economy, we saw that 84% of Amsterdam citizens is willing to share. That number was quite staggering. That, combined with the fact that we saw that Seoul in South Korea called themselves a sharing city, was an inspiration for us to also start with the initiative called Amsterdam Sharing City. So what we did a few years ago, this is like 2015, we got different players in the city together and called Amsterdam a sharing city, a living lab or a playground, so to say, for the sharing economy, with all its opportunities, but also, of course, a lot of challenges. So here you see like a deputy mayor of the city, the CTO of the city, different companies, also real estate, academics, etc., and startups coming together and saying, okay, from now on we call our city also a sharing city. And the lady after me will also talk about sharing economy. She's also partly working for Shareable, and they even said this might be the very first sharing city of Europe, or maybe even the second sharing city in the world. And it's not about that. It's about locally making an impact, but somehow this got out of hand a bit, but then in a good sense. So it spread around the world. And this is a mural painting in the city of Amsterdam, in the heart, that more or less captures what a sharing city is, in my opinion. It says, ik speel in de stad met alles wat er bestaat, but I don't expect you to understand what that is, but it says, like, briefly, like in the bottom of the slide, I play in the city with everything that is there. And that is more or less what a sharing city should be. I mean, everything is in place in a city. All the goods and services and cars and food and clothing and whatever you like, it's there. But it should maybe be sometimes a bit more equally divided. And so, over those years, more and more platforms and services came to the services in Amsterdam and became really good cases of how you could share your goods and services in a city locally and hyperlocally. And this is more or less the perspective, that we want people to feel like they have not a connection only to the city, but also to each other. I mean, that's what it's in the end all about, I think, connection. What our deputy mayor did a few years ago, after the fact that we said, okay, Amsterdam is a sharing city, she said, okay, then it's also our task to share our experience with other cities around the world. So this is 2016, this is the very first Sharing City Summit, where she invited colleagues from all over the world. Deputy mayors from New York, from Toronto, from Paris, from Seoul, from Barcelona, from Copenhagen, all coming together. This is in the backyard of the mayor's home. 2 days of talking to each other and really sharing experiences around the sharing economy. And again, all the uptakes, but also all the downsides or the challenges that are there around the sharing economy. Because of course, there are also many. Take, for example, Airbnb. Not every city is only welcoming platforms like Airbnb. So they, of course, want to exchange information and experiences on that. And so over the years, we got to talk with our organizations to many people around the world. This is with the European Commission. This is in Japan. This is in Singapore. This is a Swedish group. And this is a group in Greece. So as you see, a lot of different stakeholders, people from city governments, but also from corporations, getting together more and more around this topic to see what is happening and how it's emerging. And so many different cities we have been to over the past few years. And if we leap a bit forward, this is the year after the summit in Amsterdam. So this is 2017. This is a group of cities coming together in New York City. But then, of course, as you can see, the group is already much bigger. So more and more cities, and these are again like really the city leaders from governments, are getting together to share their experience around the sharing economy. And this is the former deputy mayor of New York. So what we really try to do with our foundation, which is the Sharing Cities Alliance, is build a global answer to a global phenomenon. And although the network is still small, this organization, this foundation is just 2 years old. My other organization, ShareNL, is 6 years old. But already we are reaching potentially a lot of people and impacting their lives. This, for example, is our friend from Washington, D.C. He's working here in the city government. I'm meeting him up with him tomorrow before I leave back for Amsterdam. We do a lot of those online seminars where people from all over the world can get together to exchange that information. We have an online magazine and we have a large digital database, all to inform those city governments. But what we want to do is open up this system also for companies, because we believe in this public-private partnerships. So this is also, depending on your background, really an invitation to just join us, join the Sharing Cities Alliance and grow this movement with, again, like all the pluses and minuses that are there. And should you be around, maybe the chance is quite small, but like in 3 weeks we will have a third Sharing Cities Summit, which will be happening in Sweden. There are a few places left, so you're invited, of course. Lastly, and I keep the pace here because, of course, I got only 15 minutes, and that's always a bit of a challenge for me because I want to share so much, but let me also share some cases from around the world with you briefly. Seoul, as I told you, was one of the first sharing cities around the world. What they have been doing from mayor level on is saying, okay, we really want to use the sharing economy to address some of our urban challenges. in all those different fields that you see on this slide. And funny enough is now that we are in the advisory board of Soul Sharing City while they were an inspiration in the first place for us. Another project that we are involved in is this project in Malmö in Sweden, where they are building a whole new area based on sharing economy, sharing energy, sharing cars, sharing spaces, sharing food, etc. It's all in one place and really inspirational. So it's called Sega Park. If you want to know more about it, please just let me know and I'll send you the information. And we've also, in our backyard, so to say, in the Netherlands, been working on a project, in this case in the city of The Hague, to really help a whole new developed area immediately from the very beginning use the sharing economy to connect people that are just going to live there. So in all sorts of areas, you can bring those people together and build a deeper connection so that they don't just buy a house, but that they really turn and live in a home. This is, for example, in the city of Ghent in Belgium. I was there last week. They're really trying more on commons-based to build a sharing economy. And this is, for example, one of the other sharing cities in our alliance, Tel Aviv, that built, from the city government perspective, a digital platform to bring citizens together on all sorts of topics and shared interests. And probably you have heard about Toronto, about Sidewalk Labs, Google, that is also realizing or developing, so to say, a new neighborhood in Toronto with all the ethical parts also connecting to it. So, for example, this is what the mayor of Toronto really quite recently said about this project. It's not all, how do you call this, daisies and roses? There's also some downsides to it when these bigger corporations tap into the field of, in this case, urban development and sharing economy. And for example, the city of Washington, D.C., this is the guy you saw before, is really trying to work more from the city government perspective as a citizen-centric institution. So they see that if more and more platforms are making the lives of people in their cities easier, that also the city government itself should be making their services much more easy. And the last example, because I have less than 1 minute, is a living lab in Denmark, which is part of IKEA, which is also developing a whole new concept for shared living. So this is the modular home that they're thinking of, and much based on the circular economy. So all the elements of a home are really something that you could reuse or recycle. And they are really thinking, okay, how is the structure looking if you want to have a shared community? So they call this the Urban Village Project, where they think of different modular homes, different services around it. And if you would take it one step further, what will be in the area, but all based on the fact that you share in your neighborhood and just not think of your perspective of your own, so to say, silo. And of course, a digital platform to connect everything. So let me speed it up. So if we look at the future of my daughter Ruli, and in 10 years already she will be, for example, be 23, then we need, I think, a phenomenon like the sharing economy. I will leave these slides for whoever wants to look back, because again, I'm out of time. But if I ask the question to different leaders in the field, how the sharing economy will look like in 10 years from now, in 2030, these will be the answers. And you see like these things like shared, social, livable, sustainable, spacious, vital, diverse, thriving, and connected. Imagine that this is the world that we are living in. I think we all want to live in that world. At least my daughter, Ruli, wants to live in that kind of world. So if you want to ensure the future of not only my daughter, but the future generations, please just join us in our work, and let's build a shared world together. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? Awesome. So I want to tell you a story. I want to start with Schoolhouse Lane in Wayne in Philadelphia. I grew up in an apartment building called Fairfax and Friends, ironically. And I had about probably 2 or 3 moms, I would say. My mother, Carolyn Ballard, and then Susan Wilson and Gail. So these were women in my life that absolutely were so connected as good friends. And it was funny because oftentimes as a little infant, we would play with Max and we'd play with all the other children. And I had no idea that we were living just in an apartment building, but they were so closely connected. So I ended up learning how to have matzo ball soup, matzo pancakes. There was a lot of African Americans and Jewish people living together in this apartment building. I never created anything out of it. I just thought it was part of my norm. And then come to realize as an adult, wow, I was actually really exposed to something called intersectionality as it related to community. It was a powerful notion that I could live in a neighborhood with such cross-cultural and cross-socioeconomic wonderful mixing. I took that for granted until I became an adult. What I want to talk to you about is intersectional social capital. Does anyone know what social capital means? Raise your hand if you're familiar with that term. We have monetary capital. Social capital, by definition, is our social networks that are around us. Those individuals that we may go to alumni association with. It could be those in our neighborhood. That network often defines our net worth. So the new currency for social mobility and resiliency is something that we're going to talk about today. And especially when you're thinking about housing and the trend in housing being community-minded, this is something to truly consider. Can you imagine a world where we decided, independent of the cash value of our skills, that our race, gender, sexuality, and class identities are our greatest assets in making the world better? And we all realized everyone has innate value and worth. Here's the thing, imagination is reality at Ying. We call it currency for humankind. Our goal is to build a global ecosystem of skill sharing. One of the pieces that was talked about earlier was this idea of neighborhoods being very hipster-oriented. And one of the key things we have to realize is cultural capital is a currency. Cultural capital, like that cool coffee shop around the corner, or who's living in my neighborhood, or some of the cultural arts that are around the housing areas. That's cultural capital. Guys, that's currency. What we're focused on is also intersectional social capital. So in addition to the fact that we want to have a community of cultural capital, it's important that we also figure out a way to create solution around intersectionality. So we created a group utility platform. Visa introduced global digital transactions. Venmo, who's actually an investor in Ying, co-founder of Venmo is an investor in Ying, introduced peer-to-peer payments. Ying has created a platform for skill sharing transactions between group members and individuals on demand. So what we've done is created an ecosystem that allows for an organization. An organization could be a major corporation, an organization or a group can be a neighborhood, to actually onboard the skills that they would like to offer to the ecosystem, as well as the skills they are looking for. So we've created an automated system that ultimately creates a skill bank for that organization, for their members to exchange skills on demand. So often we talk about TaskRabbit. If TaskRabbit and Venmo had a baby, her name would be Ying. So I want to share with you In Los Angeles, we had about 1,700 test pilot individuals and organizations to onboard to see how this would work. And what was amazing is to see the types of transactions that we're actually engaged in. And so one, we have attorneys on the platform. We have wellness coaches. We also have graphic designers. In Los Angeles, you can imagine there's loads of individuals that have a lot of creative background. So some of the exchanges that we saw were legal help. Some of it was IT assistance for a nonprofit organization, as well as graphic design for somebody that needed help. All of those exchanges were done via what we call time credits. And some of you might have heard Dr. Edgar Kahn, who's been a mentor of mine for over 17 years, created something called time banking. What we really wanted to do was to scale that, to modernize that, to allow for individuals, just like you use your Visa card for transactions, to happen every day in a global environment. So we're building a global ecosystem, almost like a global village of skill sharing, and especially focusing on intersectionality. So I talked about that term social capital before. I'm not sure if you all know this, but Forbes has named this the #2 trend in business. Why is that so powerful? Again, I go back to some of the trends happening, speaking about here at ULI. Having a community-minded approach in much of the work that you're doing in your communities is going to be key. We also talked a lot about trust. Tanya spoke to us from Edelman, and really understanding how that impacts a brand. This is crucial when you're talking about attracting, especially the millennial population, to your communities. Also, I want to point out Raj Chetty, an amazing Harvard economist, has actually spoken about social capital and its relationship to social mobility. I'm thrilled to understand that we are committed at ULI to make sure that we're looking at affordable housing, and that we're looking to ensure that citizens have the ability to be able to move into amazing communities like everybody else. Well, what's powerful about that is that Raj did a report, and I would just implore many of you to check out this article. It's pretty long, but it's worth it, to see its direct impact that social capital has in moving people up that economic ladder. So what's our movement? We call it Currency for Humankind. We'll be leveraging a lot of cultural capital. This will be happening at the end of the year, to move people towards adoption of this idea of skill sharing. And one of the first events we'll be doing is kicking off October 15th in Philadelphia. So we're excited to be right there on the ground in communities, encouraging residents and organizations to be, again, a part of a global movement to connect. One of the key things that we often do is we'll gather, like in this environment. We may say hi, but we don't leave, with the connections that really will help us move forward. Sometimes we do, but we've created a platform where you can come and gather in this type of environment and still have the ability to make the connection with each other and ask specifically for tasks that you might need help with, directly tying to skills that you're looking for. So we're looking to partner with you. We're looking for organizations that are interested in becoming skill sharing members, also individuals, as well as people that would like to be a part of opening up communities across the country. So we get to do a little exercise, and I hope you guys are down for it, because it's oftentimes that we come to these conferences and we're just pretty much sitting. So if you can, I'd love for you to turn to your neighbor or the person closest to you, and the exercise is as follows. I'm gonna ask you guys to say, what skill would you like to offer to this sort of ecosystem? What skill would you like to offer, and what skill might you be looking for? What's fun is that we get to create a little practice around what is it like to build connections in social capital. So we're gonna take 1 minute, turn to the person closest to you, not too difficult, and just say, what skill would you like to offer a global ecosystem like this, and what skill are you looking for? All right, countdown's beginning now. And it could be 3 people if you need to. What skill would you like to offer an ecosystem? What skill are you looking for? All right, fantastic. Now, I'm going to call on one group, so just be ready, don't be shy. I'm going to pick these 3 right here. All right, so go ahead and tell me, what are the skills? Yeah, go to the mic.
My skills that I have to offer are legal skills.
I'm finishing up my undergrad, so I have the luxury of thinking about larger concepts. So what's a skill I bring? Being obsessed with decentralization, lowering transactional costs, social capital transactional costs. So, I'll take apart an organization, piece it back together for you.
Awesome.
And I'm an engineer, so I can bring some engineering skills to and problem solving. And one of the skills that I would like to keep working on and get more of is coaching and communication and just those general skills.
Awesome. And what skill are you looking for?
I would be looking for business development skills, also coaching skills, and administrative assistance.
Awesome.
I'd be looking for somebody who can make anything that anybody offers relatable. So I think 2 presentations ago, relatability seemed to be bigger than popularity. So who can do that?
Awesome. So that's simple and easy, but what it did, guys, was to increase a connection between the 3 or 2 people that you just spoke to. That is a real-time example of what we're talking about when we say social capital and increasing trust. That wasn't difficult, but imagine that on a massive scale, or growing in your community and your housing development, whatever it is in whatever organization you're representing. That's what we're excited about, because you can imagine if we can increase that block by block, community by community, organization by organization, country by country, what world could we actually start to live in? Thank you so much. We're going to now bring the rest of the group out, and we are going to be open for questions and answers.
Question about Ying. How much of that is face-to-face, and how much of it is through an app?
So we saw in Los Angeles, we saw at least 60% was face-to-face, and a lot of it was through on the phone or through a video conferencing. But a task was always involved in the platform, always a task.
Okay. I just thought it's good to hear that the face-to-face, at least through a conference, is part of the equation, because I think just in that last exercise, that was a huge part of it.
Great.
My question is about trust, and I've worked my entire career in the public sector and developing trust issues and getting voters to actually provide more resources to cities. So as you did your presentation on trust, how do you build trust, particularly as we're seeing it, I think, decrease in the United States? So in your study, did you ask people besides the influencers, were there other methods that people can develop trust for institutions or organizations that provide services?
It's a great question, and yes, we've spent a lot of time studying that primarily through the lens of business, but also looking at some of the other institutions. And when you look at organizations that are trusted, right, there's a few things that they tend to have in common. The thing that always ends up at the top of the list for companies, do they treat their employees well? Okay, the number one thing that consumers think about when they think about a trusted company, right? Or something that they can experience that gives them a real clue as to whether a company will do the right thing, right? Is do they have employees that are happy? Do their employees feel motivated and excited, right? And do they show that in some way? So if you want to be a more trusted organization, that's the first place to start, is inside, right? And then your employees, of course, are going to be your best ambassadors as well. But then beyond that, it becomes about things such as, ethics and values and transparency, accountability, right? So are you just talking the talk, or are you truly showing up with actions, right, that demonstrate a real long-term commitment to, say, an issue, if that is the case, right? And we saw in the study about consumer trust, we saw some real warning signs around what we call trust washing. Companies that do a lot of, McDonald's flipped the rainbows upside down for International Women's Day, and it's so easy to paint a rainbow flag on the packaging these days, right? But are there real meaningful actions, and how many women do you really have on your board? And, is there a real commitment to what you're saying, or is it just advertising, if you will? So that's sort of a caution sign on how not to do it, because these days it's very easy for people to smell authenticity or inauthenticity. So a couple of quick tips on a big topic.
Anybody else?
Come on, guys.
I wonder if the two of you might have a perspective on trust building, right? Getting people to sign up for a platform.
Right.
And exchange skills with strangers, or doing what you've accomplished, as well. Are there kind of a couple of lessons to
I'll speak
share?
to sort of where we're coming from is really focusing on groups that already have established trust first. And that's something that's important, because the reality is that, yes, people absolutely can get to the point where, I think of Casey Fenton, my colleague who is running couch surfing. Who's heard of couch surfing? Who's ever done couch surfing before? You have, of course, the millennial-minded individuals, because it's a new way of life. So I think millennials seem to have a little bit more opportunity to go to the edge and create those trust experiences. Your daughter, absolutely. And for us, obviously, because it's a platform, we want to work initially with groups that already have that established trust. Will we grow to certainly create an opportunity for individuals to skill share with each other on demand? Absolutely, it'll grow, but we're starting with groups that already have that built-in trust first.
Great.
Yeah, and I think partly it takes a generation. So indeed, I gave this example of my daughter, and there are so many things that she just taps into in her own community. I gave some examples, but like everything, she wanted, like a few weeks ago, to bake a pie, and the oven was broken. And then she just normally ring a door near and just, okay, go there. Or she needed the mattress because a friend was staying over, didn't have one. Oh, then we go to this and this neighbor. It's so normal for her. She can totally rely on this. So it's only maybe being 12, and of course she's all the time on Instagram, etc. But maybe giving her a bit of the ethics around online sharing, but offline, she gets it totally, And I think if you just start small, so again, that example of that little dollhouse, what we put there already a few years ago, that's where it starts, I see different people in the neighborhood just doing that, and maybe from that comes a bigger product, or maybe comes skill sharing, and maybe in the end you are sharing your home with strangers. I mean, that is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's and partly it will take a generation. In the meantime, everyone who dares shares. So if there's anything that maybe you saw in the examples of today, just try it for once. I mean, the things that I had, the experiences with home sharing, that you just drive all the way from Amsterdam to France or go to Florence, you take the plane there and you just, you had a few email conversations with those people. You don't pay anything, there is no insurance, nothing. You just go all the way there and they go to your house. That's crazy. Well, a lot of people are doing it already for years.
So
I think it's just for a lot of people, it's trust leap maybe, but try it.
who in the audience may actually be interested in creating a sharing economy activation? Anybody in the audience thinking about deploying? Can you come to the mic and share a little bit? No? Okay. That's okay. Anyone else? Okay. Or just please.
So going back to your experience sharing, I've had a similar experience in my current neighborhood where there's a vast majority of folks from different age groups and getting mentorship and things like that. And we're working to try to replicate that in a new community that we're developing, where we have a sort of half millennials, half boomers. And the thought is, why not figure out a way to help a retired school teacher mentor a young school teacher, or a young engineer meet a retired engineer, or even different skills. So we haven't launched it yet, but it's something we're working on as we speak.
That's awesome, and thank you for sharing that, because, no pun intended, but one of the key things that we're starting to find, especially if you think about housing developments that are coming up, is a real need to create, almost, I don't want to say it's an insurance policy, but in a way, when you create increased trust, like you said, you have an advocate, you have a defender, and what's the other third piece?
Somebody who will pay more for new products and stand in line for them, and someone who will be a more loyal customer and consumer.
So I think that these trends are very real, and we've certainly presented you some hardcore examples, of how you can activate that. I think that's fantastic. So thank you for taking that step.
Great.
As you look at different cities around the world in the sharing economy, were there particular services that you weren't expecting people to share that you sort of saw in a global economy and brought that back to Amsterdam?
That's an interesting question. Because like in Amsterdam, a lot of things are happening. There are so many, what is maybe one of the difference if you look in Amsterdam, there are so many social enterprises, the platforms in the sharing economy. So not the big ones, I think today Airbnb announced their IPO for 2020. They're already worth 31 billion, I think even more now. Started 10 years ago, but like if you see so many platforms, not only in Amsterdam, but also in cities like Barcelona or in Belgium, etc., are social enterprises who just want to make an impact really locally. They don't want to have an IPO, they don't want to grow big, they really want to foster that local connection. So I think, and that is happening in so many different segments. Maybe just an example that I want to take is from a Dutch platform which is called Share Your Meal. And it's about food sharing, so you cook a few meals extra if you like, and then you share those with some people in the neighborhood. This story of like an elderly woman seeing this item on television about Share Your Meal and thinking, hey, I'm always getting my food supplied by the municipality because of a certain program. I'm old, but I still like to taste nice things. This is crap food. She said, okay, can I not be on this platform and get my food from that platform? Now, different municipalities in the Netherlands are working together with this platform to provide food that is freshly cooked by neighbors. And there's a social connection because people then think, okay, maybe he or she is not able to come to my place, so I'll walk up there, That, for example, is in the purest, I think, form how sharing economy could be and how it's really making an impact locally, and where also public and private are working together. So it's maybe a bit of a, turn around your question, but I think that is nice to see. And of course, we want to export different nice examples from cities around the world. And that is exactly what we should do.
I see our time is out, but I'm going to look to see if we can get one more question in.
Let's just do it.
Okay.
Let's be daring.
So go ahead. We'll be daring.
I'll be quick. There are certain things that people will be less likely to share. For example, most people would be less likely to share a wedding ring or an engagement ring or something like that. From your research, what determines whether or not an item is shareable by individuals?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Because for skills, we're not in the sharing things yet, but for skills, it's been pretty, I haven't seen anything, but there are certain things we don't do on the platform, just to be clear. But go ahead.
Well, Amsterdam. I think a lot of things are shared. I mean, and sometimes it's really a social component, of course, to it, but sometimes it's also a financial motivation. So there are platforms around the world that make it possible to, for example, share your Chanel bag or maybe even a ring. And if you want to earn a little money on it or just have that dress hanging there for 360 days a year, maybe somebody else can be really happy with it and you can earn a little buck if you want, but mostly it's a social connection. So I think in general it really goes from a drill to a ring to a car to a home, and it's in so many different areas. It mainly needs trust and some, indeed, like as I said, like some daring adventure maybe, but then even that weathering can be shared.
Guys, we're being asked to wrap up, I'm afraid. We're out of time, but it's been great sharing this hour with you. And we'll be here for a few minutes if you have some additional questions and want to chat some more.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.